The first thing that often unsettles Americans in Australia is how ordinary life seems to drift on a different wavelength. Days unfold under a wider sky, with a pace that feels unhurried yet quietly decisive. What appears relaxed on the surface hides a deeply rooted cultural rhythm, shaped by climate, geography, and a collective preference for balance over acceleration. For newcomers from the United States, this rhythm is immediately noticeable in the smallest routines: morning streets that feel calm instead of frantic, shops that open later than expected, and neighborhoods where silence is not emptiness, but simply the default state of daily life. Early impressions frequently center on timing. Australians move through their mornings without the tense urgency familiar in many American cities. Cafes do fill, but with an atmosphere that leans toward conversation rather than efficiency. Workers linger at outdoor tables, unbothered by the clock, creating a scene that feels almost cinematic in its steadiness. Grocery stores, public offices, and local markets follow this same pattern, prioritizing ease over speed. For Americans accustomed to intense service culture and immediate convenience, this slower current introduces a subtle emotional tension, an expectation of rapid movement encountering a society where time is treated with gentler hands. Social habits deepen the sense of contrast. Australians tend to keep interactions casual, even with strangers, but without the overt friendliness and small talk patterns common in the US. Conversations are warm, but not performative. Compliments are understated. Greetings are brief. The cultural preference for not making a fuss shapes everything from queuing to public behavior, and it stands out to Americans who are used to more expressive communication and a clearer sense of social performance. Even the Australian use of humour, dry and lightly teasing, can seem unusual when compared to the upbeat directness associated with everyday American interactions. Outdoor life plays a defining role in these differences. In Australia, everyday routines stretch naturally toward parks, beaches, and open spaces. It is common to see people heading out for a walk at sunset, gathering in public green areas, or planning social events around nature rather than indoor venues. Americans often note how integral this is to the cultural fabric, not as a special activity, but as a daily habit. The beach, for many Australians, feels less like a destination and more like an extension of the neighbourhood, a place woven into ordinary life. This integration of nature into the weekly routine subtly alters expectations of work, rest, and community. Australian pragmatism also emerges early. Shoes are optional in many casual settings. Coffee culture is treated with reverence, but without pretension. Neighborhood shops close early to protect personal time. Even driving behaviors reveal a collective emphasis on order and restraint. Many Americans, observing these patterns, begin to see how profoundly lifestyle is shaped by an underlying belief that life should be lived without unnecessary pressure. These habits, though surprising at first, create an emotional climate that feels distinctly grounded, inviting, but not in a hurry to prove anything. This gentle approach to daily life becomes even more visible in the small systems that structure social behavior. Australians value personal space in a way that often surprises Americans. Crowded public transport remains noticeably quiet, with commuters absorbed in their own thoughts rather than striking up spontaneous conversations. In supermarkets, customers wait patiently rather than weaving quickly through aisles. The cultural avoidance of confrontation means disagreements tend to be resolved subtly, using light humor or indirect phrasing instead of direct debate. For Americans accustomed to clear verbal cues and open expression, this understated communication can feel like deciphering an unfamiliar emotional language. Work culture further amplifies these contrasts. The expectation of balance is embedded not only in schedules but in attitudes. Long hours are sometimes necessary, but they are not celebrated as a virtue. Leaving work on time is normal, not a sign of insufficient dedication. Weekends are almost sacred, reserved for family, outdoor gatherings, or simply allowing the mind to drift away from tasks and deadlines. Many Americans find these habits disorienting at first, realizing how deeply the US system intertwines identity with productivity. In Australia, identity is rooted more in lifestyle, relationships, and how one spends time outside the office than in professional achievement alone. Everyday interactions highlight another striking difference: the informal egalitarianism that flows through Australian society. Titles matter far less, and casual language is used even in professional environments. Hierarchies exist, but they are softened by a cultural instinct to treat everyone as social equals. This is reflected in everything from chatting with a supervisor to addressing public officials. Americans often notice how this attitude creates a calmer emotional climate, reducing social tension and minimizing the pressure to perform status. It builds an atmosphere where confidence comes not from standing out, but from blending comfortably into a shared social rhythm. Typical situations reveal how these habits shape practical behavior. Neighbors may chat over a fence or share a quiet wave while tending their gardens, creating community without intruding on privacy. Barbecues unfold slowly, with a relaxed fluidity that contrasts sharply with the structured, host-centered social gatherings many Americans are used to. Even simple activities, running errands, meeting friends, stopping for coffee, carry unspoken emphasis on presence rather than efficiency. These small interactions form a pattern that becomes increasingly recognizable, an environment where pressure softens, expectations loosen, and the emotional temperature of daily life remains warm but subdued over time. Many Americans observe how these norms gently reshape their own mindsets. The absence of rush encourages a deeper awareness of surroundings, the sound of cicadas humming through summer evenings, the scent of eucalyptus after rainfall, the way light stretches across open landscapes at dusk. This sensory richness becomes part of everyday experience, slowly shifting how people interpret comfort, pace, and well-being. What once felt unusual begins to feel grounding, as if the environment itself invites a recalibration of priorities. These cultural traits shape an emotional landscape where pressure is present but rarely dominant. Mornings open with quiet routines, not a rush toward productivity. Evenings are marked by the glow of back patios, the crackle of small neighborhood gatherings, or the simple ritual of stepping outside to breathe the warm coastal air. Health, rest, and personal autonomy hold substantial weight in daily decisions. For Americans used to competitive environments and dense expectations, these shifts often feel transformative. Stress patterns soften, social comparison fades. The emotional noise that accompanies everyday life in many U.S. cities seems to quiet, replaced by a measured calm. This calmness becomes especially apparent in communal spaces. Beaches function almost like public squares, but with an unwritten code of respect and non-interference. Parks host casual sports played with enthusiasm rather than intensity. Public events, even large ones, maintain a sense of order without visible force or heavy-handed rules. These everyday scenes symbolize a cultural truth. Australians tend to trust one another to behave with common sense, and in return, public life feels intuitive rather than regulated. Americans observing these patterns often find themselves adjusting their own behaviors, stepping back from formality, speaking with less urgency, and adopting a lighter approach to daily challenges. As weeks unfold into months, many begin to understand how deeply these habits shape the inner rhythm of Australian life. It is not that the society lacks ambition or drive. Rather, ambition is expressed through lifestyle choices as much as through achievement. People invest in well-being, relationships, and free time with the same seriousness that others might invest in career milestones. This rebalancing can feel revelatory. The simple act, taking the long route home, savoring a late afternoon breeze, lingering at the table after a meal, start to feel less like luxuries and more like essential components of a grounded existence. In the end, what first seems strange becomes part of a wider recognition. Cultural habits are emotional frameworks, invisible structures that guide how a society breathes. Australia's habits may appear unusual to many Americans, yet they reveal a worldview shaped by openness, shared space, and an instinctive belief that life should remain enjoyable even in its most ordinary hours. This quiet philosophy leaves a lasting impression, offering a reminder that the pace of a place is also the pace of its people, and that sometimes a slower rhythm can reveal a deeper sense of living.